It was on my bucket list to build a house out of straw, and it's turned into a beautiful house. And again,
you remind me of one of the Three Little Pigs. I read that book to my little girls all the time. So building a house of straw.
You can tell them if they get the right builder, the straw houses stand up.
Welcome to Building Perspective, the Master Builders SA podcast. I'm your host, Will Frogley. Join me as I speak with some characters in the building construction industry.
How did CBUS become a top-performing super fund? By returning an average of 9.25% every year for the past 37 years. What does that mean? Well, it means we're pretty darn reliable. CBUS, for all of us. To consider if CBUS is right for you, go to cbussuper.com.au for a PDS and target market determination. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance.
Welcome to Building Perspective, the Master Builders SA podcast. It's great to be here today with the 2021 Master Builder SA Young Builder of the Year, Martin Round, who's the one of the owners at Spacecraft Design Build. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Will. Great to be here. Yeah, exciting to win the award. It was highly unexpected and really a nice affirmation of that we're doing something right in our business.
Well, you're right. It is a fantastic accolade and credit to yourself. I'll start by asking you today, just how did you end up getting into the building construction industry? What's your background?
I've always been interested in building ever since I was a youngster, fiddling around, pulling things apart, putting them back together, and then went to uni and did a Masters of Architecture. So a 5-year degree. And while I was studying that, I did do a lot of work on site as my cash jobs on the side. So working for other builders, plumbers, and just getting experience on site, I guess, and seeing how buildings go together, and always realising there was a disconnect between good design and good building, because on site the builders would curse the architects, and at university the architects would curse the builders. So there was always this idea that we would be able to bring the two together. And so when I left university, I did a few building jobs, working on some multi-storey buildings and just getting a bit more breadth of experience. And then we started our own company, which was a big leap and a lot of rigmarole.
And when did you start that company?
That was 2009. So yeah, I haven't really looked back since then, and it's been a lot of fun and a good experience to do it ourselves. We didn't really have a lot of mentorship, and a building company is quite a big thing. And because we do design and build, we had to have a lot of liability to take care of in creating good designs that can then be built for the right price. So that was an experience, but we've finally got the formula together now where we're very happy with our flow from design to build. It's very seamless. The clients love that idea that it's a one-stop shop. I think in some ways we were sort of some of the early adapters of that design build model. It was sort of starting to take off in that sort of time. There was a few before us, but certainly one of the early adapters of that in the domestic market.
And you certainly specialise in environmentally sustainable builds. And I think people that build with Spacecraft, they're not just looking for a standard cookie cutter home, are they?
No, absolutely. And we only really take jobs where there's breadth in the design so that we can flex the sort of architectural side of the projects. And then people also looking for the quality that we offer. So a big part of our mission statement is to build quality buildings, which will be slightly more expensive, but we don't take shortcuts. So it's getting the good sealed building so that thermally they're working really well, using materials really well, everything's double glazed, using high quality systems throughout in terms of glazing and fittings and fixtures, and then the building envelope that sort of now more and more people are adopting the passive house type technologies where you're sealing the building well and getting thermal efficiencies, which is obviously very important. And also convincing clients that bigger is not necessarily better sometimes. To get the quality, you may need to reduce the scale of the building. And we believe that the increase in quality of the build and the increase in the feel of the spaces you get from a well-designed building is worth having something a bit smaller. And we definitely push that with all our clients.
And you're certainly a very innovative builder, Martin. So I know one of the products you're currently using is hemp-based. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so look, I guess we've always been looking for a material that is going to approach something like sustainability and recyclability. I feel like there's a lot of problem with some of the sustainable solutions that may be heavily plastic wrapped, or it's the whole life cycle of some of these materials, foam panels and stuff that people are using, not necessarily the best long term for the life cycle of the building. And so we discovered Hempcrete, it's called, which is a mixture of lime and the inner parts of the hemp plant. So it's an industrial plant product mixed with lime, very simple, and packed into a formwork. And we're exploring different modules of prefabricated units, cast in situ, and there's also block systems that are available. So we've been importing hemp from overseas.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Where do you source the hemp products from?
Yeah, look, we had a long wait for a container during COVID. We bought some experimental hemp products from Belgium. That finally arrived a couple of months ago. So we've made a prefabricated hemp house to just try and show whether that's an efficiency that might be able to work in the South Australian market. We've also investigated, obviously, production being local. So long term, it's not sustainable to be bringing it from overseas. There's a very large market in Europe, so they've got a well-established supply chain.
So it is a product that's used quite widely in Europe, is it?
Absolutely, yeah. Big commercial buildings, they're making out of it, blocks of flats. Like it has the ability to transcend being just this kind of hippie. I mean, everyone sort of, gives you a little wink when you say you're building out of hemp. But being a builder and actually having worked with it, I can see the potential. And that's, I guess, an important part of what we do is I'm on site a lot of the time, seeing the reality of these materials. It's not just a kind of brochure type thing that we want to push. We're actually experimenting with it. We've got a big farmhouse in Victoria that we're designing at the moment that's all hemp, another new house in College Park that's heavily hemp walled. And the benefits of it are, I guess, it's recyclability. It's also got thermal mass benefits, and it's got indoor air quality benefits. So the building's actually a bit breathable, and it allows moisture to leave the building envelope without having to use layers of building wraps and stuff like that.
Do you ever get, some, I guess, curious looks when you tell them that you're proposing that a client builds with hemp products?
Yeah, definitely. And it was a big sell. The first house we did, we'd sort of had this idea to use it. We'd seen it being used, not yet in South Australia, but in other interstate, people have been using it. It's got a beautiful texture. And so we proposed it to a client and we thought, oh, this could be interesting. Will she go for it? And she loved the idea and was very supportive. So we were lucky to have a client that was fully behind her. And we said, look, we've not used the material before. It's a bit of a gamble, I guess. We did a lot of research to minimise any problems with the material. And in the end, she was so happy with the result, and so were we. It was a lovely little build. And that was a small extension, only about 40 square metres. And so now with the two designs we've got in the pipeline, with a bigger house, we can really test its kind of suitability. It's the belief that there's got to be a better material to use, something that's able to be produced locally and it's renewable. We can keep digging clay out of the ground for bricks, and that can go on for a long time. But with hemp, you get a beautiful building envelope that's truly sustainable. I mean, there's the lime component to it, but it's a lot less energy than firing bricks or firing concrete or firing cement. So yeah, look, hopefully we can show with the full house that it can be done, and it's a material for the mainstream, which is where we've also explored the SIP idea, the structural panels, because to bring it to a low cost, there's got to be a solution that's efficient on site. So yeah, I think that market is growing, and it needs to be more than token gestures if we're going to keep expanding our kind of built environment the way that we are. It would be nice to see some truly sustainable options being inserted rather than just greenwashing, which we see a lot of.
Are there any other builders that you're aware of in South Australia using hemp at the moment? Yeah,
there was a project done in Mount Barker just after we finished our first build. They did a series of units. So I think there was maybe up to 20 units that they built with it. But again, everything's being imported from overseas. So to get the supply chain here is a bit of a process. And we have had a bit of a think about the production of it. We've talked to SARDI, the government research arm, about whether it's a viable crop in South Australia, because really that's the key to it. It's got to be sourced locally. We can't keep shipping it from Europe. Otherwise, it's sort of counterproductive.
I understand. So you mentioned energy efficiency before. What's the typical kind of star rating you'd have on one of your builds, and what are some of the other things you do to get that rating up?
Yeah, well, look, it was interesting. The hemp house that we did had quite a lot of glazing in it, and actually only just achieved 6 stars. But often I feel that the star rating system is maybe a little bit flawed, and there's probably some more holistic things that you can do that maybe don't get quite recognised in the star system.
What would some of those be?
We're very much into passive kind of solar gain, so we're always looking at orientation of buildings, which is really important. Because all of our buildings are custom designed, there's always that opportunity to face them and orient them in the right way, which you may not get on some of the more spec homes where they're being kind of put on the block to fit for access, etc. So we're always looking at getting that good solar gain, having a component of thermal mass so that the building is regulated. The thermal mass will store heat and regulate the temperature internally. Overdoing the insulation is always a big thing. That's a massive component of keeping a house energy efficient. And also just protecting, like thinking about western walls that are copying a lot of sun. Small things like that can make a really big difference. And now doing all of our buildings minimal double glazing, which our glazier always says having single glazing is like putting a bit of Glad wrap over your window, which is pretty right. If you ever put your hand next to a piece of glass on a hot day, single glazed, it's roasting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So most of your builds, you mentioned, some in the inner east. I take it most of your builds are kind of in the Adelaide Hills region. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. East, north, east, and southeast. So a few in Unley. College Park, I mentioned, Stirling. We've got one up at Montacute at the moment. So it is sort of, look, there's no denying that our designs and builds are not cheap builds, and people approach us because they want that special something, the bespoke kind of crafted. We're very big on nice details and honesty of material. So, if you're going to use timber, use it realistically. So we're not so much into veneers or sticking stones onto a facade. If the material is good for a purpose, then let's express that purpose. And so those sort of natural materials that we are using in terms of timbers and stones and stuff, usually solid and well crafted, and hence expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is where the hemp SIP idea came from, is looking, well, can we do a model where the building is more of a prefabricated building and it's less bespoke? We would like to, at some stage, be able to offer, a cheaper home that's approachable to the not maybe at the bottom of the market, but at least approachable for people that want a sustainable home that's at a good price. And we do get approached a lot by people who have budgets that are a little bit low for the scale of building that they want, and to also implement the sustainability aspects. I always sort of say that, spec homes that are at the bottom end of the market are so affordable, and we can't compete with that. And it's not that a sustainable home is overpriced, it's that those prices for those cheap homes are probably debasing what the reality of a good home should be. And maybe that is a requirement that we up the specifications on some of those low-end homes to make them more realistic. Yeah, I guess, we're far from that slap a house up kind of area, and you can see why they can do it cheaply. But yeah, there's got to be an entry point that you can get a sustainable home that's close to that, I guess. And the key is prefabrication.
Yep, and you've won a number of awards besides Young Builder of the Year. So I think you've really proven that you can build in an environmentally conscious way and still build a very good quality home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very proud of all of our projects. We put a lot of effort in. We go above and beyond. I mean, I always say that we're not in the industry to make money. We're in the industry to make buildings that will last the test of time. So we prefer to put energy into that. I mean, we make a living, but we're not by any means taking advantage of the industry, which I think there's a lot of that going on in the industry at the moment. There's a lot of price gouging through the demand for professionals in the industry, which is really sad to see. I mean, we've had just some quotes that we get for subcontracting just make your eyes water. And so there is a bit of a problem, I think, in the last year or two where that's some people are really taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that is the issue we're facing as an industry at the moment, is those shortages of materials and trades, and the price increases that we're seeing with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing Master Builders has done is actually contacted the ACCC to see if they can investigate price gouging in that space, and it's definitely a huge issue right now.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Yeah, look, I mean, we tend to work with trades that we've got good relationships with, so we know that we're doing all right. But every now and then I'll be putting out tenders to other contractors and getting a reality check of what is going on in the industry for other people. So yeah, and the material shortage has just been pretty painful for everyone for the last 2 years. I'm not saying anything new there, but just waiting for stuff that formerly was easy to get a hold of. Obviously the timber being a big one there, which is sort of happening at the moment. But yeah, we're almost back, but not quite. It depends where you go, but there's still issues with supply.
Yeah, you mentioned before about where you've been building around Adelaide. Have you ever built, in a coastal area? Because I know that can be very challenging in terms of building an energy efficient home.
Yeah, look, we haven't actually, and it's not through avoiding it, but I always think, the challenge of building in a coastal area is quite large. I've definitely worked on some homes that have had big issues in coastal areas, replacing cladding, not our projects, thankfully. But yeah, there is always that extra kind of level of detail that's required in those areas. We've just done a new home down at Yankalilla, but that was a little bit removed from the coast. And that was actually a straw bale house. So that was it was on my bucket list to build a house out of straw. And it's turned into a beautiful house. And again,
you remind me of one of the Three Little Pigs. I read that book to my little girls all the time. So building a house of straw.
You can tell them if they get the right builder, the straw house will stand up. And it's actually, again, that was a request from the client to have that material for good insulation. Get R7 insulation from your walls in a straw house. So a massive amount of insulation compared to, say, R2.5 bat in a wall. But also part of that project was to make that material presentable in a modern way, so it was a farmhouse, and so presenting it as a modern farmhouse that you wouldn't know that it was straw bale. Often buildings with alternative materials are built by people themselves and they look a bit ratty and a bit homemade, but I really wanted to present that home as something that was an example of, okay, there are other options that you can use. And that, again, is not a cheap material because it's a different structural system. You're creating post and beam structures as opposed to stud frame structures. But in the end, that place was about 2,500 a square metre. So still, in the approachable range for that style of house. So we're keen to try any new materials, and it's only through using that material that I learned that, look, I probably wouldn't do another straw house. It was a beautiful house, but I think the hemp has better possibilities in terms of buildability. The beauty about hemp is that you can build a stud frame house conventionally with some slight detail changes. So the timber framing is all very much the same, and then just with the addition of hemp. So it's approachable for the building technology we have. And I think that's the big part of new technologies, is to not make the leap too big, because there's a lot of investment in that. So if you can slowly transition people to new technologies and materials, that's a really good way.
Where do you see the future of the industry going in particular? Can you see any scope for further innovation in, I guess, your area?
Oh, yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, we always say we're sort of at the forefront of hemp, but if a material like that can be perfected and there's people working overseas on different systems, the industry has to change more dramatically. And I think that's there. There's a little bit of denial about how much it really needs to change, I think. I mean, you think about the amount of consumption that we're, and Adelaide's a small place, but we're consuming like crazy. The quarries close to the city are getting more and more depleted, so they're looking for more hills to chop out for aggregates. And I know there's a large quarry near me, and they're having to expand that. And those resources need to be close to the city because transport's an issue. I mean, I think there's huge problems in some of our building developments in the outer fringes, and I think if you're going to have an increased population, you're better off densifying your existing urban areas for obvious reasons. You get a richer cultural texture. I think a lot of this development in the greenfield sites is creating the new slums of the future, basically. No one wants to admit that either, really. But I think if you are going to densify, then put it back to the city, put it back to the existing urban areas, and you get a richer texture, you get better transport systems. So I think that's probably, I mean, it's far from what we're involved in, but it's something I think about a lot. I mean, we are always trying to be more responsible in how we design. I don't think you'll get that when money is the only factor that people are interested in, unfortunately.
So you touched on this a bit earlier, but young people tend to be, I guess, the most environmentally conscious out of any demographic, and I'm sure a lot of them would love to build, a more energy efficient home. But most of them, getting a deposit to build any home is a huge struggle. Do you think it's going to be more accessible to, I guess, first home buyers in the future?
Yeah, look, I hope so. And yes, it has been a very pertinent thing for us lately because we've had a few younger clients who are trying to enter the market and want to build cheap houses. And a particular client the other day, he said, "Oh, it's me and my dog, but, I'd like a 3-bedroom house, and I might have a wife later." And I sort of said, well, and he's got $200,000, and in our kind of field, in our kind of level of building, and the quality that he wanted, because he was talking about the quality and the sustainability and the design factors that he would like. The only thing you can do in a situation like that is, you either go and buy a home off the shelf, or I was trying to convince him that maybe build a smaller home that's adaptable later to add another segment to. And obviously it's more efficient to build everything at once, but if you really want the quality and you really want the sustainability, you'll have to build something smaller. And I've covered this in our last chat, Will, that I live in a house that's 25 square metres footprint. And everyone kind of rolls their eyes at that, but it's actually all I need. It's myself and my partner, and
25 square metres.
That's ground floor, and then there's a mezzanine bedroom and the library upstairs. So there's a little bit.
And whereabouts is this
in
the Adelaide Hills?
Yeah, this is in the Adelaide Hills. Yeah,
I'd love to come and check it out sometime. I've got to say, just to check out a 25 square metre.
How compact it is.
Yeah.
Look, and it's all about.
Well, if you have an argument with your wife, where do you go to hide? You go for a walk down the street, do you?
It's 10 acres, so yeah, there's plenty of room to get away.
Oh, that's good to know.
But yeah, that's the extreme at one end, and I think there's a middle ground there. We've become so used to having these massive houses, and we're guilty of it. We certainly expand people's houses beyond what is probably absolutely required in a lot of instances. But I think if you are on limited budgets, it's something that you can seriously think about. I mean, there was the tiny house movement that took off in America, and people, unable to afford building their own homes, were building tiny houses that were even smaller than what I'm in. And I'm not necessarily saying that people should go to that extreme, but I think definitely there's room for people to, and a well-designed house that's a bit smaller is not necessarily worse than a bigger house that's badly designed. So there's a factor of where good design can really make a place seem bigger and more functional. Certainly in my little 25 square metres, everything's got a place. We're also fairly kind of busy people. We do a lot of gardening, preserving, and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of components that you need for that sort of lifestyle. So it's all about having good storage and a place for everything, rather than just big rooms that you drop items of furniture into. And it was interesting, actually, the straw bale house we did. It was quite a small house, 120 square meters internally. And on plan, the clients always say, it's not big enough, we need it bigger. And I always say, don't worry, it's like, I know what a room needs to be to function. And then you pour the slab and they say, oh, it's tiny, we're never going to be able to live in this thing. And I always say, look, it looks tiny when you pour the slab, but when you get the walls up, it actually feels bigger again. And that's across the board. Every house we do, we say that to people, and people go, oh yeah, you're right, actually, it is bigger. And they thought it wasn't going to be a big enough house, and actually now they're thinking, oh, it might be a little bit too big for us. So yeah, look, it's not for everyone, the smaller house, and I don't maybe advocate for a tiny house, but I think a small house, well designed, is the only way to make it approachable for people at that entry level of the market to get a quality building. Because otherwise, like you say, I'll go to the big builders and get something squirted out of a tube. And a lot of young people, like you say, are not wanting that. And it also pushes them, I guess, further from the CBD in that pursuit of the kind of land and house balance, price-wise. So certainly we're noticing some of the younger clients looking further afield in the more rural areas.
Yeah. So, Bart, you're definitely not your typical builder, and I think your client's not your typical home buyer. But I think what you have been able to done is been innovative. You've got a niche market, and you're building, as I said earlier, quality homes. It's not just a gimmick. So I think it's fantastic to see you doing so well. I've really enjoyed the chat today. We're definitely covering a lot of areas which, I guess, again, aren't typical for a lot of people in our industry or for home buyers. But I think it's really exciting to see someone who thinks outside the box and sees a need to step into a new space. And I think you're doing that in a great way. So congratulations and all the best.
Thank you, Will, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that I'm passionate about and that we're passionate about. And yeah, thank you for that opportunity.
Anytime. Thanks for joining me on Building Perspective. For more information on Master Builders or our guests, please visit our website at mbasa.com.au.